Hello and welcome back to another episode from Driving Britain. Today we're going to be looking at American foods which are banned across Europe and the United Kingdom. We don't just mean foods that are difficult to get hold of, we mean foods that have been outright banned because of what's in them.
The FDA just digs their heels in, supported by lots of lobbyists' money, and they go, everything's fine, totally fine, don't worry about it.
Everybody knows that America's not great when it comes to food ingredients. We know that there's quite a lot of things that make people quite ill, but yet they're still allowed to be in the foods. To people across Europe and the UK, that seems pretty bizarre that that would be allowed to happen, and we assume it's just down to corporate power and things like that.
It's actually banned in 160 countries. That's over 3/4 of the known world. As if there's an unknown world. However, the US is standing true, saying, it's totally fine. We're going to put ractopamine in our pork.
But maybe there's more to it. Either way, let's have a look at what sort of things have been banned and why. The video we're going to be looking at is by Evan Edinger, and his link is in the description as always. Right, let's get straight into the video.
It's actually banned for sale in the UK because of its carcinogenic additives. This is how I pour milk. It's real good though. So today we're going to be looking at a lot of foods that are enjoyed in the States but are outright banned in the UK and EU for various reasons. And in a couple weeks I'm going to be doing a part 2 to this where we look at the vice versa there, the EU foods that are banned in the US. So be sure to subscribe, okay? It'll be coming soon. Or ring my bell. Actually, speaking of bells, cowbells. The first item on our list today is milk, or rather what they put into milk in the US. Recombinant somatotropin, RBST, also previously used to be called bovine growth hormone, is a genetically engineered hormone injected into dairy cows to increase the means of milk production. Now, if you aren't American, I'm assuming you've heard of bovine growth hormone at some point in your life. I know growing up, my mom would tell me that girls were getting to puberty earlier and earlier because of all the hormones that they're pumping into the cows, which is coming out in the milk. Now, that actually was fully a myth, and there's no science to substantiate that. And in fact, the RBST that is put into cows, in American cows at least, has no scientific backing to prove that it has any negative repercussions on humans at all. However, that didn't stop the EU and UK following up with banning its sale of milk from RBST cows anywhere within their bounds because of the effect it has on the cows themselves. EU commissions that did studies on RBST in cows found that the quality of life of cows given the hormone was drastically worse than cows that were not. If you think about it, their udders are just getting so much more full than they're meant to, weighing them down, being uncomfortable. It is a bit of a contentious issue, especially with the whole got milk lobby in the States really trying to push its way into EU markets, but the EU being very firm. There are some reports in the 90s that were purporting this to just be a complete trade war economic type of thing, and that the EU...
Yeah, I can't see us wanting to really buy that much American milk and have that in the UK just because of the whole weight issue. Trying to transport weight from the US through to the UK, that's got to be a pretty expensive thing to try and do. That's why when you see some orange juice being sold, it says not from concentrate or from concentrate. That's because on one version they boil all of the water out of it, leaving just kind of a powder residue, get it to its destination, then rehydrate it. That'll be the concentrate. I'm not sure that you could do something similar with milk, which means that unless it's going to be the value of oil, then shipping it right across the ocean, I'm not sure that that's going to be economically viable. So I don't really know that it's about money. I think it's mainly about the animal's health. In the UK, in Europe, we are a lot more concerned about animal rights and human rights than what seems to be evident in the US. If people had to kind of, slaughter the animals and things that they were eating, most people probably wouldn't eat meat. So most people in Europe and the UK kind of think that, well, I wouldn't want to be the person doing that because I'd probably just not eat it. I'd rather go without than have to do that. We want somebody else to do that for us. So the least that we can do is at least make sure that the animals are kind of comfortable as they can be in between times. We don't like the whole idea of it. We just like the eating part. So to ease our conscience, that's where it kind of comes into it, I think. Whereas in the US, I think that profit rules above anything and everything. Also, the idea of adding extra chemicals to the cattle to try and make them grow faster or produce more milk, that's really not liked in the UK and throughout many European countries, because even though a lot of these companies claim, oh, you'll never get any residue go through to the humans, it just doesn't happen. They also claim the same about the antibiotics. Yet there's so many people now that are complaining about getting some form of upset stomach or IBS or the symptoms of celiac disease, gluten intolerance, that a lot of people are avoiding wheat products and all sorts of stuff because they assume that they're gluten intolerant, whereas really it's your body, your stomach, reacting against a lot of the chemicals that have been added to the food, either with the herbicides and pesticides, antibiotics, all of that sort of stuff, and that's what's causing so many upset stomachs in so many people. That much so that there's something like the original amount of people claiming that they were suffering any type of allergies and stomach upsets and things like this from food types. 10 or 15 years ago, that was down to something like 15% is the average. But then it skyrocketed up to now 2 in 3 people are saying that they're getting some sort of stomachache or some sort of adverse effects after eating particular foods. And that's not because of the foods themselves, it's because of things that are being added to it. Now, we all understand the arguments for adding these things to the food to make food grow faster, to make it not be eaten by things other than humans, insects and that sort of stuff. We understand that. But at the same time, we understand that it's making us feel very, very ill.
Who made things up, but at the end of the day, the US's FDA, or Food and Drug Administration, have stated that food products made from RBST-treated cows are safe for human consumption, and no statistically significant difference exists between milk derived from RBST-treated cows and non. And there's yet to be a conclusive study disproving that. Now, despite this being
you've got to think about who's going to be producing these studies. Now, studies to say that there's no negative impact, they're going to be conducted by the company trying to sell the product. The FDA is paid by those companies. It's not a charity organisation. And the same for the UK. The companies that investigate the foods, they're not charity organisations, they're paid for companies. So you've got a report by the company that's trying to sell the product saying, oh, no, it's all good for you. You don't need to worry about it. Don't you worry your pretty little head, it's just fine. So then we want competing research or opposite research to be able to actually validate that. Well, who's going to do that? Who's going to pay for that? So why would or should another company pop up and just independently run a very expensive research project into somebody else's product? Now, you'd expect that your government would be doing that, but they just don't. There's too many foods out there for them to do it for a start, but even if they could, they probably wouldn't. So it means that nobody's got the inclination to run competing research. Well, to run independent research, which may be competing. So the fact that there's research saying, oh, it's fine, and there's not any research saying it's not fine, it's probably down to the fact that no research has been done, and that's the end of it, rather than because it is or isn't.
A worse experience for the cows in the States that are given this hormone. You might be wondering, well, why do they do it anyway? Well, the answer's kind of easy. The average cow injected with RBST nets the farmer an extra $15.88 in profit. That's per cow. Gotta milk them for all they're worth. No bull. Next up, everybody's favorite game.
If you've got a massive amount of cows, like you see these huge American prairies, 1,000 head of cow and that sort of stuff, then that's going to add up, I guess, to an amount that's worth paying attention to. I think in British farms where you're going to have a lot less cattle, and the same for a lot of European countries because we're just generally smaller. I suppose if you looked at Europe and classed it as one big country with independent states rather than independent countries as one big group, then maybe you change your idea. But in the US, farmers have a lot more head of cattle than what most European or British farmers are likely to have. So that $15 per head of cattle, that can add up to quite a lot of money. In the UK, in European countries, probably not so much.
Gamer soda, Mountain Dew. Everybody knows Mountain Dew, right? It's like the super punchy, citrusy flavored soda that you're probably thinking, wait a minute, that's not banned in the EU. I've seen that. Well, you see, the original recipe for Mountain Dew included BVO, which caused it to be banned by both the EU and Japan because BVO, or brominated vegetable oil, contains bromine. What's wrong with bromine? That's usually what I say when someone tries to take my Mountain Dew. Mine. Well, bromine is an element that, when it builds up in the body, has a very high potential to, cause you skin damage, memory loss, nerve damage. That's the main reason why it's banned in Japan and the EU. And so Mountain Dew
so just a few minor things. They're nothing really serious.
It was like, we'll fix this recipe for you guys since you don't want nerve damage. The thing about BVO is that it was sensationally referred to as the thing that is in brominated flame retardant, just because that really spreads with Facebook moms. Like, oh my God, flame retardant in my child's drink? But the main problem that we had in our household with Mountain Dew was any one of us had any Mountain Dew, we would be bouncing off the walls. The amount of sugar and caffeine in that stuff, boom, sure, large amount.
Yeah, Mountain Dew in the UK, it's that full of fake sugars, saccharin and stuff like that, that it's got a real sickly, horrible taste to it. I don't know what original Mountain Dew, the US version, tastes like, but the UK version is just not good. If you want some sort of boost drink, then you're probably going to go for the main brand of Red Bull or something like that. Mountain Dew, you might have it as an actual just fizzy carbonated drink, but as a boosting drink, I don't think it's got anything left in the UK version to make it a boosting drink. I don't know that it's even got any caffeine left in it. It might have, but there's so many other products that are kind of better known in the UK, especially things like Red Bull, but you've also got quite a few others, Monster and things like that, that I don't think that anybody would readily or easily switch to the sickly taste of Mountain Dew. It's like as if they've tried to make it just as sweet as the US version, but by using artificial sugars. But anybody that's stuck artificial sugars and stuff knows that it ends up more sickly than sweet. And that's pretty much how, or for me personally, I thought the Mountain Dew taste.
Of BVO can cause birth defects in newborns, but when used in a soda, it helps all the oil flavorings not dissolve, so that way they can separate and give you a nice in your mouth. And in your womb, I guess. But if you are an American connoisseur of the Mountain Dew or the fabled Baja Blast, don't worry, it's not in the recipe anymore, so for the most part, you're fine. All I do know is it's not illegal, and the FDA says it's okay. Now let's just have a look at the Walmart brand Mountain Dew and... Now this next one might ruffle a few feathers, but you might not know this.
So
chickens in the US are chlorinated. That means they are washed with a chlorine bath to prevent the spread of salmonella and such before you all eat your lovely chicken. Now,
chlorine, that stuff that you use in wars, chlorine gas and things like that. That'll be the same type of chlorine.
This is absolutely banned in the UK, the EU, and many other countries who don't think we should be eating things that have been washed with chlorine. That being said, the main reason isn't probably what you're thinking. It's actually because, according to the EU law, they felt that by just using a quick chlorine bath, it's kind of cutting corners and allowing for farmers to basically not care about their entire production line and just go, we'll fix it in post, essentially. We'll just have really, really dirty, unhealthy, unsanitary farms and then just wash it all away with chlorine. They went, we're not going to allow that. We'd rather you actually have a good, healthy, safety production line rather than just...
I think from a UK perspective, it's both. We don't like the idea of food that's been washed in chlorine. Your bathroom floor, that's washed in chlorine. Your food, not so much. And also, we want to know that the animals have been looked after, because like I said earlier, none of us have got the guts to be the ones slaughtering the animals that we're eating. We want somebody else to do that horrible stuff for us because we want to pretend that it doesn't happen. We like eating the stuff, but we don't want to be involved in that whole middle bit. So the least that we feel that we can do to ease our conscience and make us feel a little bit better is to make sure that the animals are looked after in a decent sort of way beforehand. And battery hens, that really doesn't cut it as far as most UK and European people think about the health of a chicken, as it's being kind of reared for its eggs or boosted for meat or anything else. They just shouldn't be in those sort of conditions. No animal should be in those sort of conditions. We tend to try to think of how animals are kept in a very humanistic sort of way. Whatever conditions we don't think are fit for a human, then they're not fit for animals. That's the way that we at least try to think of it. Now, in reality, it's not like that at all. Animals, when somebody's acting pretty scabby, then you say, oh, you animal. Because animals live rough. They don't live like humans. They live in mud and dirt and all the rest of it. So it's never going to be a nice, clean, homely environment. But at the same time, we want to know that at least a good effort's been made to make them comfortable.
Bandage it. I'm sure at this point you've seen those gruesome images of chickens in incredibly small pens with nowhere to go, really dirty living space. Well, the whole point of this law isn't necessarily to protect humans from chlorine, but to make sure that that is much less likely to happen, to have these really unsanitary living spaces.
In reality, in a lot of UK, European farms, even the kind of grass-fed type chickens that you think of, where you think it's the most humane version possible, they also end up spending most of their life in sheds because they can only really spend reasonable times, good weather times, outside. So a lot of the year they end up in sheds anyway. And if they're in sheds, then they're going to need to be corn-fed because they're in sheds. They can't find natural food amongst the grass and stuff like that. So even when you try to buy just kind of natural wild chickens or as close to that sort of scenario as you think that you're going to be able to buy, you're not realistically going to be getting anything close to that because that's just not reality.
Whereas in the US, it doesn't really matter how the chickens are raised, how they're stored, how they're butchered. As long as you wash it with a bit of chlorine, everything's kind of okay. I don't really know how I feel about it. Obviously, I've grown up in the States and I've eaten plenty of chicken and I'm totally fine. How would you feel about this? Like I said, I don't think it has anything to do with human health as much as just making sure your production line is up to scratch.
Yeah, it is both though, because we want the production line to be up to scratch as much as possible because of what I said earlier. At the same time, we really don't like the idea of eating food that's had to be washed in chlorine or that has been washed in chlorine. Use chlorines and bleaches and things like that for washing surfaces and bathrooms and things like that. The floor of your kitchen, yeah. The food in your kitchen, not so much.
Chicken scratch. As a fun fact, a big post-Brexit fear was that because of the supply chain issues that Brexit would cause, the UK would then have to start relying on chlorinated chicken, and a huge amount of people in the UK were very much against this. However, that was one of the very, very, very few Brexit fears that actually didn't come to fruition. So there's that.
That's not true. True, we didn't have the chicken. That's true. But I mean, Brexit fears, it's now a couple of years past Brexit, and all of the scare stories that were put out about Brexit, or all these things that would happen if we dared to go for Brexit, they just turned out to be lies. Pretty much all of them. In fact, I can't think of one single one that actually turned out to be true. If you can think of a scare story that was put out about Brexit that actually turned out to be true, then add it to the comments, because I can't think of any at the moment. I know that there's some talk about European workers going home on farms, not managing to get the workers. In the UK, you have to pay minimum wage as a minimum wage, whether they're a foreign worker or not. So if those farms are paying out the minimum wage for legitimate workers, then they would be paying out that amount to any worker. The only benefit that they could have is if they're paying somebody not minimum wage. So we shouldn't have made a difference to them. There was still just as many people in the UK that was eligible to do that work as what there was from abroad. So I don't even know that that one was a real one. But I don't know of any actual things that's happened, any consequences to the UK, that's as a result, a direct result of Brexit. There's plenty of things that's happened over the past few years in all of our countries, but I don't know that there's anything different that's happened in the UK that hasn't happened in every other country because of COVID and all the other stuff that's been going on over the past few years. We have had some rubbish prime ministers popping into office for a couple of days and then being sacked and a new one put in. That's made a big difference towards our economy, because it's caused a bit of instability and people not wanting to rely on the markets and stuff. But as a direct consequence of Brexit, I'm not sure. I don't think that I've really seen anything come to fruition from the scare stories that were out originally. But put it in the comments and tell me if I'm wrong. This isn't a for or against Brexit either. It's just, if you're going to speak about something, then you need to be speaking down the middle of the line about it. There either is stories and they were true, or there isn't.
Use chlorinated chicken. Ractopamine. Now, it isn't just banned in the UK, the EU, Japan. No, it's actually banned in 160 countries. That's over 3/4 of the known world. As if there's an unknown world. However, the US is standing true, saying, it's totally fine. We're gonna put ractopamine in our pork. 40 to 60% of pigs farmed in the US have ractopamine, a drug that enhances the lean muscle mass of the animals. There are definitely some serious questions about the safety of ractopamine, whose only use originally was to treat people with asthma until it was found out that it increased the production of animals that we went, let's just put it in some piggies. The National Pork Producers Council of the States have been lobbying the EU like mad, demanding that all food, health, and safety concerns be completely dismissed because, well, profits. Those pigs with ractopamine bring home quite the bacon. But the EFSA, or European Food Safety Authority, have said that the use of ractopamine in pigs has a very large chance of creating downer pigs. Downer pigs are essentially pigs that have been engorged with this lean muscle mass to the point where they can no longer even stand. Their point basically meaning that this is incredibly cruel to the pigs. Also, ractopamine has shown to have catastrophic effects on the human cardiovascular system, as well as increase your anxiety levels. Some US pork...
Like I said earlier, a lot of these companies claim that once you cook the foods, then these products no longer exist in the foods. The cooking process apparently gets rid of all residue from it. So they're putting stuff into pork and chickens and cows and all sorts of other stuff and all of the other products to make them grow faster, to make them grow bigger, and to make them grow very quickly. So what's happening to humans? Although I'm sure that there's no relationship between the two.
Producers have begun phasing out the use of the drug, but like 160 countries. Like, the US FDA has got to be sitting there like, am I out of touch? No, it's the 160 other countries that are wrong. Or rather, well, these pork lobbyists have given me quite a lot of money.
It's not me, it's everybody else.
So I think it's kind of fine. So we've had milk, we've had chicken, we've
that's
had
what it comes
pork.
down to.
What is next? Bread? All right, get ready for this, because bread sold in the States contains
American
potassium
bread.
bromate.
It always comes
And
back to
listen,
the bread.
It's not your bromate. In fact, potassium bromate is used in the bread making process in the States because it helps bread rise faster, higher, and makes bread manufacturers quite a lot of dough. But it's also heavily linked to cancer, nervous system damage, and kidney damage. And in the States, it's in pretty much all foodstuffs. Bagels, bread rolls, breadcrumbs, you name it. While it is completely banned in the UK and EU, in which our bread doesn't taste like sugar. I'm gonna be real sad to find out that the Cheesecake Factory bread has this stuff in it, because that bread, I don't care if you say it's sweet, it's delicious. Now, not all bread products in the States contain potassium bromate. For those products that don't contain it, there are worse things, like something I'm not going to be able to pronounce. For instance, like Pillsbury breadsticks, a lot of the nice little bun things you can get in the freezer aisle at Walmart, like Jimmy Dean sandwiches, breakfast rolls, and such. They contain azodicarbonamide, which is a chemical compound found in yoga mats, as well as shoe soles. Yummy! Makes it extra spongy. The reason why so many US manufacturers use azodicarbonamide is that it makes the bread stuff look a lot whiter.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's a problem overall, isn't it? Bleaching foods and things like that to make them look more white, or adding extra colorants to make them look more red, or adding yellow dye to egg yolks to make them look more yellow, and all sorts of bizarre stuff like that. Whereas most people buying the foods just want to buy healthy, clean food. We really don't care about how yellow the yolk is, so long as it's natural. But then because they start dyeing them yellow, then people start to expect to see them in bright, vivid yellow. And then when you get one that's not bright, vivid yellow, then you think there's something wrong with it. So they cause actual kind of whole momentum to it. Putting stuff in your food that's that harmful, that's just stupid, that is. You know, there's got to be somebody in a company thinking, okay, we can put this in our food. It's probably going to make a lot of people very seriously ill or even kill people, but we will make a little bit more money out of it. So let's do that. What sort of psychopath is making those sort of decisions? They're the people feeding you. But it's not just America. We've got things like, you know, the titanium white in the UK and stuff as well. The EU and UK, we're not immune from this. We've got our fair share of pretty devastating things that's going into foods as well. It's not that we're immune, they're just worse than us. Sorry, America.
Yeah, both in bread and cereal flour, it's used as a whitening agent and dough conditioner. While the FDA thinks it's totally fine to add this chemical compound to basically any bread product under the sun, it is banned in Europe, Singapore, and many other countries for its heavy link to respiratory problems as well as other health issues. And in Singapore specifically, if you are caught using this substance in any of your manufacturing process, you're jailed for 15 years and a fine of up to $450,000.
That's got to be a pretty seriously bad product to have that type of punishment for it. And you're eating that in your food every single day because somebody decided that they can make a little bit more money by forcing you to eat that. Because, you know, let's be clear, when an American goes to a shop to buy food, it's not like they're thinking, oh, I'm going to buy that one because it's a bit more chemical filled, or it's a little bit cheaper or something like that. They really don't get a choice. Yeah, you can get the choice between single fat or full fat cream, or whether you buy a diet soda or a full sugar soda. But it's not like you can buy soda that doesn't have the extra chemicals in. It's not like you can buy a pack of sweets that doesn't have the extra chemicals in. It's not like you can buy the meats that don't have the extra chemicals in. You can buy different versions of it, but you can't buy, you know, the chemical-free versions. You can buy the so-called more healthy versions, as in, like with milk, you can get full fat, skimmed and semi-skimmed in the UK. I guess there's going to be a US version of that. Most people would kind of head for the semi-skimmed, where it's, you know, a half and half type idea, so that you're being kind of semi-conscious about how many calories and what sort of fats and stuff you're taking on board. Those sort of choices, you do get that in the US. But the stuff that the milk itself is spiked with, you don't get a choice on that. You can't have a healthy option as far as those sort of things go.
But I'm sure it's fine. Even Australia, who's usually pretty chill about a lot of things, do not use azodicarbonamide. Don't do it. Finally, we've gotten to my favorite cereal. A lot of cereals in the States use BHT, which is a flavor enhancer. Now, I've got no problem with most flavor enhancers. Heck, I love me some monosodium glutamate, okay? Throw a little bit of MSG and everything. Mwah! But BHT, well, it's a little different. See, it's put in a lot of these cereals and things to enhance the flavors, and it only comes with mild side effects of decreasing your testosterone count and decreasing the quality of your sperm. But also, there have been numerous studies to prove that BHT is an endocrine disruptor, so it actually has way more effects than that. Is it really making the food taste that much better? For me to have less sperm?
Yeah, it's delicious. Oh no, what's it got in it?
But it does lower your sperm count.
BHT is used in a lot of these cereals because it just gives you that little bit of a fresh feeling in the box. They actually line the bags with BHT.
That shouldn't happen. They shouldn't be doing that. They should be stopped for that. All of these companies adding dangerous chemicals to foods. It doesn't matter whether it's the less serious effect of, I don't know, you may get a skin rash or something, or whether it's the devastating effect of it's likely to kill you. If it's harming humans, and they know it's harming humans, they're actively putting it into food. They should be held accountable for that. Not put in a position where they can pay companies like the FDA and stuff like that to ignore it. And you've got the vicious circle of, like what he's talking about now, where it makes it taste, more fresh, or the taste is a bit more vivid. If you have that cereal and you think, oh, that tastes really nice, that's much nicer than all of the others, not realising it's because they spiked it with a chemical, then you're going to automatically choose that one again because you're going to think it tastes really nice, not really knowing what it is that you're choosing. And because they sell more, then they're going to keep doing it. And then the other companies, they're also going to start doing it because they realise the effect that it's having with that one company. Their sales are going down and theirs are going up. So then the whole industry starts to do it, which then moves on to the next scenario where somebody else tries to find a new way to make you want to buy their product by adding yet another chemical to it, rather than just accepting that foods taste the way that they do, and that's what foods taste like. Eggs taste like eggs. Bacon tastes just like bacon. Bread tastes just like it does, and cereal tastes the way that it does. We can make it taste different, we can create it into different ways by spiking it with harmful chemicals. Or we could just accept that that's how it tastes, and that in itself is quite a nice taste. If you had a peanut butter sandwich, yeah, it tastes nice, and I'm sure you could make it nicer by lacing it with syrup or something. You could make it taste better, but you'd know that you'd be taking on board a lot of extra sugars for no real reason. Now you change that syrup for a harmful chemical. That's just not acceptable.
FDA has insisted BHT is totally safe in small quantities.
Yeah, I'm sure
I don't know
they
about
have.
you, but growing up in the States, I would eat 3 to 4 bowls of cereal in one sitting sometimes, because that was my balanced breakfast, so I don't know how I feel about that. Now, cereal producer General Mills in the States has agreed to phase out its use of BHT, but Kellogg's and Post in the States have agreed that maybe the pros outweigh the cons, to their profits, I suppose. They don't really see it as a real problem. Now, I remember a couple years back, they had finally brought over Fruit Loops to the UK, and I was like, whoa, finally, we get a cool American cereal. However, this is what it looked like. If you're an American, you're like, what the hell is that? I know. Here's the difference between US and UK Fruit Loops. You see, legally speaking, you can't really sell the American Fruit Loops because it contains so many E-numbers, is what they're called over here. I only recently found out about E-numbers. My girlfriend brought it up like, oh, that's got a lot of E-numbers. And I was like, Evan numbers? No. The E in E-numbers actually stands for Europe, and E-numbers represent a number for each different food additive that exists. And in the US, we've got E-numbers in pretty much everything. Think of all the brightly colored food you know. That's some E-numbers right there. In 2007, a UK study found a clear link between the use of specific E-numbers and hyperactivity in children. Now, the E-numbers that they actually found increased the hyperactivity in children were E102, E110, E122, and E124. All those different food dyes. Now, following these studies,
Yeah, there's two things to say here. One is, not all E-numbers are bad. It kind of represents everything, whether it's, garlic, seasoning or something like that, or salt. Salt's usually labelled differently, but any type of seasoning they're going to be, or any type of ingredient on that sort of idea, they're going to be listed under an E number, under a code. But the ones that we generally talk about are the harmful ones, like what he's just been mentioning there. Let's see if we can get back to that.
increased the hyperactivity in children were E1.
Okay, no, it's not going to clear the screen, is it? Well, either way, it's on about E102, E110 and stuff like that. So they're the ones where we know that they cause negative effects, like hyperactivity and things like that in children. That's one part. The second part is, as an adult, if you saw that a product had got E110 or E102 in and you knew that that caused hyperactivity, would you purposely choose that food to eat for yourself because you would think it's going to boost you up a bit and make you, or give you a big boost of energy? Because you wouldn't want to feed it to your kids, but as an adult, whereas you become slower, more lethargic, you start to look out for those sort of things a little bit more than what you probably should do, because you go for a can of Red Bull because you want it to boost you up. But what about them E-numbers? If they're known to boost you up and cause hyperactivity, maybe that would just take you from being a slow, lethargic adult to a more hyperactive sort of adult. Would you do that? Is that something that people do? Let me know in the comment section.
E102, E110, E122, and E124. All those different food dye. And in 2009, the UK implemented a temporary ban on the specific E numbers listed in the studies. But by ban, I don't mean that you weren't allowed to sell any products with them. Rather, you could, as long as somewhere on your packaging there was a warning that stated that consumption of this item may have an adverse effect on the activity and attention of children. Now, as you've seen, usually when
Are adults actually going out and looking at these ingredients and seeing that it's something that's not appropriate for their kids, but then thinking, maybe I might like a little bit of that, and taking it for that purpose, like a can of Red Bull or something? Does that happen? Is that a thing? Now I've mentioned it, is it going to be a thing? Is that something that you're probably going to think about doing next time you're sluggishly working your way around the supermarket and you happen to recognise one of those E-number codes? Let me know in the comments.
the FDA just digs their heels in, supported by lots of lobbyists' money, and they go, everything's fine, totally fine, don't worry about it. But even in this case, the FDA actually had to come out and be like, well, there is a chance that some children also will develop hivish rashes as a reaction to these E-numbers. So it just seems like so many cons for what realistically is.
Yeah, I've just changed my mind. Any adults that are going out trying to find these E-numbers to boost you up and make yourself a little bit more, well, hyperactive or less lethargic, you might also look like you've got leprosy. Maybe it's not such a good choice.
Is just brightly colored cereals. That being said, sometimes the UK recipe of a US product is just awful. I mean, talking about the Fruit Loops, listen, I know it kind of looks like grass, and it's not as appealing as the pretty colors that caused me hyperactivity as a child, but it would be okay if it didn't taste like garbage. It just tasted like cardboard. Kind of ruined the whole appeal of the sugary cereal. I do think it's very important that we're not just pumping our children full of sugar.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was just trying to say, even though I was saying it in a bit of a humorous sort of way. Some of these products, we know that they have certain effects on the body and the brain. So now, do you think that you should have both of those boxes on the shelf and you can buy one for your kids and one for you because you think it's going to give you a bit more of a boost? Assuming that things like hives and things like that weren't also part of the side effects. If it was just more of a boosting sort of product, like Red Bull in a cereal, I guess. Would you go for it then? Because let's face it, you're even getting caffeine advertised in hair shampoo nowadays, and people are buying it thinking it's going to give them some sort of invigorating boost for their morning shower. So do you think we should have both in the UK? A big warning label on it letting you know exactly what it is that you're about to buy, but so that you have the choice to be able to do it. Do you think that that should happen? I don't mean ones that are giving serious side effects like cancers and arms falling off or, anything like that. I just mean ones that you know are going to make you more hyperactive or turn you from lethargic to a normal person. Something along them sort of lines.
So in a way, I'm thankful, but also as an adult, I'm like, I also want the ability to just kind of have that. We don't ban chocolate cake.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But then again, we don't market chocolate cake to children as a breakfast treat. Not even a treat, just a meal. Then again, I grew up believing that donuts are a breakfast food. And I stand by that belief.
Chocolate spread springs to mind.
Certain crumb coffee cakes are also breakfast food in my book, so my brain is a place that's so confusing. It's got warring cultures up there. I mean, the Fruit Loops in the States are flavored with like artificial grape flavors and berry flavors. In the UK, and I'm not kidding here, their Fruit Loops are flavored with nettles and spinach. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't sound quite as good, does it?
What child is going to be like, things that hurt me unless I have a dock leaf, or spinach. But research in this video has helped me realize that's why it's so hard to find my second favorite soda, Sunkist. It's just the specific E numbers make it just not really that profitable to sell over here. Also, if you are wondering, Birch beer, that's my favorite soda. Very hard to get, pretty much only in the northeast of the US, but it's the best. One final interesting note I found researching this video is that it seems the US's Food and Drug Administration care more about probabilities. How small is the chance that a negative side effect could happen? If small enough, that's okay. Whereas the European agency is more focused on possibilities. If there is any possibility of a negative side effect, especially in an additive that's non-essential, they'd rather just have it removed than risk consumer health. And so if you found any of these banned substances to be a bit blown out of proportion,
Yeah, you've got to look at the philosophy behind the two groups though. In the US, if you get ill, then it's up to you to take care of yourself, or you need your health insurance to take you off to a hospital or something like that. If you get seriously ill from a food that's given you cancer or something like that, then you're going to have to foot the bill yourself, or you're going to have to use health insurance if you've got it. In the UK and most European countries, if you become ill, then you become a burden on the state. The FDA, they're all about money. Now, whether it's money being given us to the FDA to ignore the dangers of certain foods, or whether it's just to allow a product to be sold more freely throughout the US because it makes the government money. Whichever way around you look at it, it still comes down to money takes top priority, and health is on the bottom of the list. The only time they're going to care about health is if they think they're in some way going to get sued for their findings. And even then, they just stay ambiguous about it so that they can never really be cornered on anything that they've said, which is what the companies themselves do a lot of the time. They use ambiguous terms and phrases, indicate this or indicate that, just so that they're never really backed into a corner. That way they can do what they want and get away with it. And that's how the FDA, that's how American food companies conduct themselves. Because if something goes wrong, it's down to you to dig yourself out of that hole. It doesn't cost the country any money at all. It doesn't cost the food companies any money. It doesn't cost the FDA any money. It doesn't cost the American government any money. In the UK or in a European country, if you're ill, that's going to become a burden on the government. It's going to become a burden on the people because people pay into the funds that kind of funds the hospitals. In the UK, you pay your national insurance. All working people pay for national insurance, which pays for the healthcare system. So if you get bunches of people all going in that they're eating, I don't know, a particular cereal, and it's making them grow 4 extra arms, and they keep on having to get millions of people rolled out into hospital to get a few extra arms cut off because they've been growing too many because of a certain cereal, then you're really going to want that cereal stopped because that's taking a large portion of the funding for the NHS to keep cutting off these extra arms. So now if we think about that in terms of a more realistic sort of illness, such as cancer, that can be a very heavy burden, financial burden on the NHS. Now the government, they're not going to want to keep footing the bill for large portions of the population being put into that category and using up all the money out of the NHS for their cancers, not because they particularly care about the people, but because they care about the pounds, just the same as the FDA and the American government. It's just that for the FDA and American government, if you have to pay out for healthcare, or if somebody's in need of healthcare, it's down to the individual to foot the bill themselves. For EU countries and the UK, it's down to the government. So there's a philosophical difference for their entire outlook. EU countries, the UK, they're looking at prevention because they don't want to incur the costs. They don't care about the people. Let's not kid ourselves about this. Our governments don't care about what it does to you. They care about how much money you're going to cost. That's it. In the UK and EU, if you start to become ill, if masses of the population become ill because of a certain product, it's going to start costing a lot more money. You're going to be weighing down on the country. Large portions of the population are going to be weighing down on the country. Financially weighing down. They would rather you just not be able to buy that product and not become that burden. Think of it from the UK government perspective. You have 2 cereals, one's brightly coloured and one isn't. One tastes nice, one doesn't. If you let the nice tasting one through that's all brightly coloured, it's going to make people ill and then become a financial burden. Or you don't allow them to have that one because you don't allow it to be sold in the country. People have no choice but to buy the one that doesn't taste so good, that isn't so brightly coloured, and it doesn't make them become a financial burden on the economy and the country. So in the US, you only have the bad options. In the UK, you only have the apparent good options. Now that doesn't mean that our system's foolproof because, like I said, there's things like titanium white and all of the others that's been coming through recently that's pretty bad for you. There are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of these different chemicals that get put through into our foods. And these companies, they're very, very sneaky. If they put through a compound into a food which is then highlighted to be dangerous, especially pharmaceutical companies, but we'll stick to food for this. I know people eat some tablets like they're sweets, but let's just brush all over that. These companies, what they'll do, if they put out a product that is then highlighted by one of our governments to be dangerous, they will reinvent that product. To keep it simple, say if you had water, H2O, H, hydrogen, 2O, 2 oxygen molecules. Say if that turned out to be carcinogenic, it was harmful, it's causing cancers and stuff, and that got banned. These companies know that they could perhaps add a nitrogen molecule to that combination which plays no part in the oxygen but can be attached to it without causing any changes. That technically then makes it a completely different product, which then allows them to reintroduce that product back into the market as a completely different thing. Now, it'll probably cause more confusion than not by using something like H2O, but okay, let's look at this a different way. Say if a fruit salad was made up of a tomato, a piece of lettuce and a piece of cucumber, and that was found to be harmful, which if you're a child, you probably believe that. It's not, it's very good for you. Tomato, lettuce, cucumber. Now, say if the government turned around and said, actually, we think that this is really, really harmful. Imagine if you was a company that realised that you could take away the piece of lettuce and swap it for a piece of radish, and it still do exactly the same thing as what you wanted, because really it's the tomato that's causing the main effect. You've essentially created a new product, which is no longer the product that's been banned, which then allows you to reintroduce that product for however many years it takes for the courts to then turn up and say, actually, we think that this is a dangerous product, we want this banned. And that's how these companies circumvent the laws to allow them to put harmful stuff into the foods in the UK and European countries as well as the US. Having completely confused you with my very poor explanation and analogy, let's get back to the video.
Well, you might be looking at it from more of a probability standpoint as opposed to a possibility one, but each agency is doing what they think is best for the citizens they watch over at the end of the day. Whether or not you agree is up to you. But let's just say foods dubiously banned in other countries is your passion. Well, why not tell the world about it by making a blog?
Okay, I said let's get back to the video, and it turns out that it is at the end of his video. That wasn't very well timed for where I stopped it there, was it? I should have looked ahead. Either way, the foods and the different things that have been banned, were you aware of any of these? Have you eaten any of these foods when you've been travelling around other countries? Do you think that they should be banned in the UK and EU countries? Do you think that the US should also be banning them, or do you think that we should be allowing them? Which way around do you think it is? And if you saw an E number on a food product that you knew caused hyperactivity but no other side effects, would you purposely choose it as an adult because you'd think it's going to boost you up? Just a thought. Okay, if you've enjoyed this video, then please click the thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.